What is the creepiest, most disturbing internet rabbit hole you've gone down? And why? Blogs by people who are obsessed with losing limbs and or having them replaced with hooks, etc. Some went through with accidents where they mashed their hands beyond repair in order to achieve their goal. Airline School. It's pretty famous, but for those who never heard of it, American school that lasted for 40 years that was as close to a concentration camp for children as you could get. There's a doc called The Bridge, which captured 23 of the 24 suicides from the Golden Gate Bridge in SF in 2004. Apparently the bridge is a wildly popular suicide site. By 2004, there had been more than 1,200 suicides, with a 98% death rate. Anyway, it's really dark and sent me on a little research expedition of the suicides. Apparently, the 2% that survive say they instantly regretted jumping mid-air. And that starts to make you think about suicides and how much pain people are in to take that step. And yet there is a shock of clarity once they've done the irreversible. Just reading about that desperation and sadness triggered so much in me. I really can't go down those rabbit holes anymore. The Wonder Bread guy, he's just so bizarre and strangely otherworldly. A being that seeks only to get those strange art depictions of those certain acts. I did a bit of research about school shootings around the world. From Columbine to the most recent one in Mexico at the time. It was terrifying to read the survivors' testimonies. I just imagined what would I do if that happened in my school. And ended up crying thinking about my little brother's fate in those circumstances. Also, the statistical analysis and studies about the topic are unnerving, since they seem to be more frequent globally every year. And I hated getting to know about those groups that praise shooters. I would prefer if I didn't know those exist. It's frustrating. Pulled up a site once that had pictures of celebs that were taken after they died. The most prominent one I remember being that of Chris Farley. Frick, that's something I'll never forget. Saudi Arabia's leading executioner, Mohammed Saad al-Beshi. He mostly decapitates people with a sword. I watched read interviews with him. I wanted to know if that poop haunts him. No, it doesn't. He's already teaching his son to follow in his footsteps. His children also help him clean the blood off his sword. Then I started looking into what was considered capital offenses and other punishments used. Stoning is one. Certain crimes will get the beheaded body crucified. Looking up pictures of people who hit the ground after falling from great heights. I looked it up mostly out of morbid curiosity. Definitely would not recommend for anyone with a weak stomach. Subjects were deprived of food and water to determine the length of time until death, placed into low pressure chambers until their eyes popped from the sockets, experimented upon to determine the relationship between temperature, burns, and human survival, electrocuted, placed into centrifuges and spun until death, injected with animal blood, exposed to lethal doses of X-rays, subjected to various chemical weapons inside gas chambers, injected with seawater, and burned or buried alive. A straightforward guy wrote down his experiences with heroin. Basically he wanted to try it for fun and he was sure that he had enough willpower to stop after that. Well, he was wrong. Probably someone can remember the name of the guy or the Reddit post. It's fairly well known, I believe. Cave diving accidents. They are always tragic and sad and insanely common in the community due to the dangers of cave diving. But they have been to some of the most untouched areas of Earth and I kind of get the need to keep exploring even if it's dangerous. I have fallen down too. Both lasted about a week. First was John Jane Does who have never been claimed or identified. Second was people who have disappeared without a trace. I feel this one tugged more on my emotional strings. Especially stories involving kids. One that has stuck with me is a little boy who disappeared on a scout hike. Jared Negrete. That is one of my greatest fears when I take kids hiking. There's this guy on Facebook, I wish I could remember his name, but he married his hanky panky doll and has photos together of them everywhere. At first I thought it was a troll account, but the more I looked, the creepier it got. The dates on the photos dated back years and he showed off his doll's wardrobe and all the possessions he had of hers, and then there were multiple friend accounts of different hanky panky dolls on his page. That's completely public, but genuinely the weirdest part to me was that he lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Like, imagine if someone accidentally ended up there. Edit. I spent an hour last night looking for it and surprisingly it's apparently more common than I thought. WTF is wrong with people anyways? I'll look some more today because it was a viral share. Deaths on Mt. Everest and how a lot of the bodies are still up there. This was a wiki rabbit hole I fell into after listening to the Casafile episode on David Sharp. Read not only about him but also Green Boots, this couple that got separated, etc. due to the extremely cold temperatures. The bodies aren't that decomposed, so they still look recent even though it's been years or decades. It's creepy and sad. Some bodies have been there so long they are used as markers for climbers. What is also sad is that there have been efforts to remove them, but doing so is extremely dangerous because of the altitude, temperatures, and uneven ground. People have died attempting it in the past. Not sure if they've managed to succeed since I last read about it in 2018. Edit. I'm not 100% sure the podcast was Casafile since I listened to the episode I mentioned 3 years ago. It could have been another true crime podcast. Also thanks for my first Reddit award. A sci-fi timeline PDF I found a while back. I think it was on the world building sub. It was a timeline of humanity that started it off relatively normal, detailing human evolution as they colonized Mars and the stars beyond. It descended into body horror when they came into contact with their advanced race that for some reason I forget gene modded the majority of humans into non-sentient species and seeded them across the galaxy. It then went into great detail with each of these species separately in their climb back to sentience. It ended with one of the new humans that evolved back to sentience standing beside her original human skull. I haven't been able to find it since, but poop got dark. Edit. I found it again. It's All Tomorrows, a billion-year chronicle of the myriad species and varying fortunes of man. This will sound mild compared to the stories of actual torture and war crimes, but I heard the whole story about a Reddit user named Jason in Hill. For those who don't know, it was the real story of man who posted in our relationships about his wife cheating on him with a neighbor. Jason finally decides he's going to leave his wife and take the kids with him. But then the wife actually murdered the children while he was away at work. Jason made a follow-up post about dealing with the pain and grief of what happened, but he seems to be doing his best despite everything that happened. Edit. Thank you for all the awards. Guys, I didn't expect this to blow up at all. For those who mentioned the channel, yes, I do remember this from Nexpo. I'm a longtime subscriber. Bug chasers because someone asked what the creepiest, most disturbing internet rabbit hole was. The murder of Junko Furuta. Temple OS is a trip. Worth a read. The guy behind it was pretty genuinely insane. Literally and figuratively. He used his homebrew OS to talk to God, and believed he was married to the YouTuber that didn't talk to him. I was a lurker in a car forum for many years. This was probably 8 or so years ago. One time someone posted a thread that linked to an insurance, auto, website that resold accident cars to reclaim money. There was a whole category of cars labeled biohazard. And these are the cars that end up with body fluids in them, giant poops from being in an accident, drive-by shootings with blood everywhere, even suicide cars with brains blasted on the roof. These auto auctions don't wanna clean that mess up, so they will sell the cars cheap. Some people in the forum even found news articles that corresponded with the murder accident etc. in a particular car. It was incredibly creepy. But I admittedly spent hours and hours sometimes looking through these disgusting, tragic cars. I read about the Japanese concentration camps being especially horrible on Reddit, and that was extremely depressing and fricked up, but I couldn't bring myself to stop reading. I once found a fetish forum for people who collect STDs and deliberately infect others as it turns them on. Full-on discussions about which hookers to bareback to get the complete set. Really freaked me out more than B0 grams. Org etc. Ever did. I can't even remember how I found it. I backed away quickly and never looked back. Edit. This is now my most upvoted comment. Thanks Reddit. I corrected it to be 0 grams. Org. I was also thinking of the Something Awful website. Comments below reliably inform, although I am not googling, bug chasers. The public suicide of R. Bud Dwyer. I was listening to Get Your Gun by Marilyn Manson and found out that it included an audio sample of that moment. I was curious and found a video of him, Dwyer, shooting himself in the mouth with a pistol. I never knew how much blood can come out of someone's nose. I didn't know how to react. And I just laughed. It wasn't funny at all. It was disturbing. I don't know why I laughed. This isn't really that great of an answer as it's the first thing that comes to mind. But I watched a lot of To Catch a Predator footage early in COVID. Those people are disgusting. And it's so weird to see some plain ass dude be otherwise totally normal seeming, but have disgusting desires. And then turn into a lying machine when they get caught. That moment when someone realizes they are exposed. Millions of people are going to know. And they are also going to lose their career, job, family, friends, etc. Is just a very complex, interesting and gross human reaction to see. Might be between the disappearance of that Malaysia Airlines flight a couple years ago. Its route was tracked into the Indian Ocean and then lost. There's only speculations as to what happened on board. Or the story of the guy who got his intestines shucked out his ass by the pooled rain. Or the redditor who amputated his own pee and balls in a hotel room. With pictures. I can never unsee that. Not really creepy. More of mentally challenging. It all started with me watching some random liminal space video with some slow, mildly distorted music, then decided to go down the comments section and stumbled upon some context about the music used. It was taken from Everywhere at the End of Time by The Caretaker, an album about the experience of suffering from Alzheimer's. Of course. I searched it up and listened to the full 6-hour album in one sitting, listening to 20s pop, progressing to music with the reverb toned really high, drone sounds and a depressing ending. In that time, I was experiencing actual anxiety and developing the fear of forgetting. I was not mentally ready for it yet. Interesting community though. Everyone felt the same way as I did about the masterpiece. The group's stalking sites and subreddit. Just to be clear, I don't think it's real, but holy shit. It's just so crazy thinking about how all these people are dead ass convinced that there are massive conspiracies against them. I didn't leave the link on purpose because after spending any significant amount of time on there, you sort of start to think it could be real. One of the weirdest for me was reading about the violence in Yugoslavia during WW2. Especially about the Croatian Ustaše and the Jasenovac concentration camp. The entire area was beset by civil war, with shocking violence originating from multiple parties. But the anecdotes about the Ustaše stand out. A high-ranking member of the Nazi party visited Croatia, where the Nazis had helped establish a puppet state. Witnessing the extent of the violence himself, he was quoted as saying, "This is enough to make a man vomit. Jasenovac is something no mortal man could bear to witness." The tragic tale of Junko Furuta made me sick and cry while I was reading her story. The Secret of NIMH is based on a real scientific experiment that got so bad it had to be cancelled because all the staff quit, basically from existential dread. Found that paper online. Reading alone at 3 AM in the dark. Nope. Didn't sleep that night. I came across a site called Rotten.com about 20 years ago. It was nothing but crime scene and autopsy photos. The things people can do to another is unspeakable. I recently rickrolled a Redditor and he sent me over to NSFW warning. Arpinectomy as revenge. That was a weird trip to say the least. I wanted to learn more about gender dysphoria to better understand trans people and such. I learned about this set of twins. Bruce and Brian Raymer. Born in the 1960s. They were boys. But Bruce had a botched circumcision. So he had gender reassignment surgery and was raised as a girl. Named Brenda. The twins were sent to a doctor named John Money who wanted to prove that gender identity is learned. He made the twins as children role-play sexual positions to reinforce the gender reassignment. Brian developed schizophrenia in his teenage years and Brenda never learned to live as a girl despite constant reinforcement and hormone therapy. At 14. He was told of his surgery at birth. Rejected his forced female identity and took on the name David. David Raymer committed suicide in 2004.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, well, why not go ahead and hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more responses to this thread, well then, take a look. There's the link in the description below. And remember, show some love to those authors while you're there. And I look forward to seeing you next time.